Today on episode number 381 of the School of Podcasting's morning announcements, which you can find at schoolofpodcasting.com/381. We've got a great because of my podcast story. We got a last 5 and 5. We're going to talk a little business podcasting with Ben Kruger of Authority Engine. We're going to talk facial massagers and free media hosting. And of course, your questions answered. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I am your personal podcast coach, Dave Jackson, thanking you so very much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, this is where we flatten the learning curve of podcasting. We throw out the jargon as I bring my 20 plus years of technical training to the microphone and let you know that you are never alone in your podcast journey. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, it's super easy. Just go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact and you can jump in. There's all sorts of ways to contact me there. Yeah, if you're new to the show, did you notice something different? Yeah, I didn't list the 37 different ways to contact me. And that's partly due to the fact that I was on episode number 20 of the Podcasters Roundtable. And let's just start off with a snippet of that before we get to our podcast success story. Take it away, Ray.
We are asking the question, can you ask your audience for too much? And we're going to discuss this concept. But before we do, I want to ask you to go out and give Podcasters Roundtable a rating on iTunes, 5 stars. I want you to give a full written review. I want you to go to Twitter and send me feedback. I want you to call 925-567-3335. Please email ray@thepodcasterstudio.com. Circle me on Google Plus and go over and circle Dave Jackson. And then go over and circle Isabella Russell. And then, I'm sorry, am I asking for too much?
And does that for the newsletter?
Does that sound familiar? Does that sound... Oh, sign up for the newsletter. Does that sound like some podcasts you know? Have you ever heard a podcast start like that?
There you go. Check that out over at podcastersroundtable.com. I'll put a link to that out in the show notes at schoolofpodcasting.com/381. And I do like to start off the show with a bit of podcast success story. And this comes from the New Media Show. You can find that at newmediashow.com. One of my favorite podcasts that I just discovered, Rob Greenlee from Microsoft, Todd Cochran from the Blueberry Network, and wow, good stuff. And they were interviewing a guy named Caleb Bacon. And just, if you've never listened to the New Media Show, they just interviewed Callie Lewis from Geekbeat.tv. Always good guests. Always phenomenal content. And here, what do you know? It's inspiring me to tell you, go listen to that show. And here's a clip from Caleb Bacon on the show as he explains because of my podcast.
Podcasting has brought me more opportunities to make money and other things. Like there's a magazine article I'm writing now that I don't think I can say what it is yet, but like that's something because of my podcast. The TV show I write on, Sullivan and Son, a sitcom on TBS, they asked me to host the official Sullivan and Son podcast, as a result of my podcast. And so that was a great thing. You got to interview all the actors and other writers and producers and put out 12 of those shows to go with the season that we had on the summer. That was a fantastic thing. So I think podcasting can lead down different paths that'll make you some dough, even if it's not as simple as an advertiser each episode.
There you go. Just another example of podcasting opening doors. And again, check out Rob and Todd over at newmediashow.com. And speaking of Blueberry, which of course, and Todd and that whole realm of the podosphere, I want to say thank you to everyone who's contacted me to say, hey, Dave, I've been voting for you every day at the Podcast Awards. So I'm going to take just 2 seconds here to say, if you go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/podcast awards, you'll see I made a video to show you how easy it is to vote. And I'm hoping that you'll vote for me, the School of Podcasting, in the general category. And I have another one in the religion category called Feeding My Faith. And if you could just take a quick second and either just go to podcastawards.com and vote there, or if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/podcast awards, I'll show you what to do. But it is so deeply appreciated, and we'll see what's going to happen. Am I going to win? I don't know. but I've had a lot of people say it would be great if you would. And I made a joke on the Podcasters Roundtable. They said, what would it mean to you? And I said, it would do something that doesn't happen very often, and it would probably make me speechless. So if you like me, please go vote for me. If you don't like me and want me to shut up, just go vote for me. There you go. While you're at it, in the technology category, vote for my buddy Daniel J. Lewis. He's at the Audacity to Podcast. He's in the technology category. He's also in the Ramen Noodle and the Clean Comedy podcast over there in comedy, and the Once Upon a Time podcast over in Best Produced. And I've got a list of everybody that I am voting for. So if you want to see that, you can go to schoolofpodcasting.com/podcast awards.
And now it's time for a Last 5 and 5. What were the last 5 podcasts you listened to?
It is that time for a Last 5 and 5, and today's comes from Marion.
Hi, Dave. This is Marion Pierre-Louis, host of the history podcast Fieldstone Common at fieldstonecommon.com. Here's my last 5 and 5. First is The Feed, the new podcast by the folks at Libsyn Media and hosted by Elsie Escobar. I've got just about a year and a half of podcasting under my belt, so I figure it's important to learn as much about podcasting as possible. The Feed helps me stay on top of what I need to do to improve my podcast. Next up is Your Website Engineer by Dustin Hartzler. This is my go-to podcast for up-to-date information about WordPress. I like that his podcasts are typically between 15 and 30 minutes long. And I also like that he's really responsive to feedback. So if you give him a question or send him a suggestion, it's very likely that within a month he will do a webinar or a discussion about that topic. He doesn't cover all aspects of WordPress, though, so I'm keen to check out that WordPress app podcast that you mentioned in a previous show. Third is the Backstory podcast by the American History Guys. As a history buff, I love the way they take current issues and then explore how those same ideas have played out historically in America. After the recent time change last weekend, they broadcast a show about how time has changed in U.S. history, and it was really fascinating. Fourth is the Bowery Boys New York City. This is another history podcast. I've never listened to them before, but they recently featured an episode of Ghost Stories, so I listened in and found it fun and very well done. The last one is Photoshop with Matt. This is a video podcast. I subscribed because I wanted to see if I could watch it right in iTunes on my phone along with my audio podcasts. The answer is yes, but the screen on my phone is really way too small to see the details of what he is teaching in his podcast. So I'll probably watch it again, but I'll do it from my computer. Thanks, Dave, for your terrific show and for letting me share my last 5 and 5. This is Marion Pierre-Louis from fieldstonecommon.com. Bye.
Thank you so much, Marion. Again, you can find her at fieldstonecommon.com. Very, very cool. And if you're wondering, like, what, last 5 and what? Means what were the last 5 podcasts you listened to? Not so much what are your favorite 5 podcasts, but just look at your phone. What were the last 5 that you listened to? And you can, again, go out to the website. Now, what Marion did is she actually just recorded it and emailed it over to me. You can do that as well. But go to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact, and you can see how to get your smiling voice on the show. It's kind of interesting because Marion's like, I'm not sure if it sounds great, Marion. What are you talking about? That was awesome. So thank you very much for that. And now it's time to play the Let's Beat a Dead Horse game. If you're a regular listener to the show, and don't tune out because you're going to want to hear this, you know I am not a big fan of free media hosting. I know my buddy Brian over at podcastdojo.com likes to use free stuff. I do not. And I was in LinkedIn, and somebody put a little post, come listen to my podcast. And I noticed that, how like when you put a link on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, typically whatever system you're in kind of reads the title of whatever it is you've linked to. And his was supposed to be about mob management by Don Vito, but instead it said Podomatic Best Free Podcast. So instead of showing his title, it showed the title of their website. Thank you, because apparently his website is on Podomatic. Now, Podomatic is free, and in my opinion, one of the worst. But this takes the cake. I mean, I've been doing this since 2005. I've seen a lot of things that I'm like, man, this one is definitely in the top 5, if not top, period. So I went down and I clicked on listen. I'm like, what is this? It's really weird. I was like, this is really weird. And it was from a guy named John McGurk. And what Podomatic does, what Blog Talk Radio does, they just slam. Insert other adjective you can. I mean, I would say tsunami, but that seems insensitive. Just a tidal wave advertising because it's free. As the old saying goes, there are no free lunches. So you're going to pay by annoying your audience with ads while they try to listen to your 30-second podcast. And so I'm watching, and I noticed that their player rotates ads about every 5 seconds. It's a new ad, it's a new ad, it's a new ad. And which completely, by the way, distracts you from what I'm supposed to be listening to this guy talk about marketing lessons from Don Vito, right? He's got to do the family. So I'm taken aback. There's a gravestone. I'm like, oh, does this go with what this guy's talking about? And then I see it come up on the screen. I'm going to say the word vibrator. I guess I could have said facial massager that happens to be somewhat phallic. You know what okay, got it. Okay. So I'm sitting there watching it and I'm going, I wonder if these pictures go with what this guy is talking about, because I don't think they do. And it comes up and it says the black box vibrator, Turbine vibrators from the Cougar division. And I'm like, Cougar? Okay. And I'm thinking, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is some sort of engine, right? Turbine vibrators. So I Googled turbine vibrators, and you know what? They weren't talking about any kind of engines, it turns out. And I was like, yeah. So yeah, he's getting his podcast hosted for free. And while he's talking about mob lessons, management lessons from the mob, he's advertising vibrators. You shouldn't mess with vibrators on the podcast. It's not professional. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So, yeah, go ahead, use free. Lose your branding, by the way, because everything that's linked to you is going to say Podomatic. And yeah, if you don't mind because I mean, there are plenty of people that are advertising adult toys on other podcasts. I wouldn't want it on mine. Nothing against adult toys. You know, I'm not a prude. I just, when I'm trying to tell you about something, yeah. So there you go. That's, I'm still, there you go. I can't talk. I just look at that and go, what? So there you go. It's free. You know, and think about this. If I went with a plan, like I go with the $20 plan at Libsyn, LIBSYN.com. Use the coupon code SOP free to get a free month. It's $20 a month. Divide that by 30 days. They're talking 67 cents a day. That's half a can of pop. Because I'm in Ohio and we say pop. We don't say soda. Amazing. Vibrators. Okay, I got to just end it. We'll just transition music here. All right, next up, speaking of the Podcasters Roundtable, one of the things I love about that show and love the fact that Ray keeps having me back. And speaking of Ray, you can find Ray over at the Podcasters Studio. So Podcaster Studio will get you there. Ray Ortega, great guy. And Daniel J. Lewis is on there a lot as well. And I get to meet really cool people. And so one of them was Ben Kruger. And I had actually discovered Ben's podcast. And he does a lot of things about business podcasting. And so when Ray said, hey, do you know anybody who would want to chime in? I said, hey, give this guy a call. He seems pretty cool. So after that episode, I reached out to Ben and said, hey, I'd like to have you come on and share what you're seeing from helping businesses start podcasts. And he agreed. Now, I want to give you a little behind the scenes of this before we get to the interview. I'm using a program now called Call Burner. because it will work with Skype after December 2013. I will say this. There was a post on Mashable that said Skype is not going to change their API, but that article is so incredibly, in my opinion, A, poorly written, and B, it makes no sense. Because they're like, hey, Skype has changed their mind. The only thing that isn't affected is third-party apps. Well, those were the things that were affected. So it's basically saying, hey, you know how those software titles weren't going to work in the future? Skype has changed your mind. The only thing that it's not going to change is the titles that weren't going to be able to record. Well, that was the whole problem. It's a really weird article. So I saw on Skype, went to their blog site, didn't see any kind of news anywhere that they had changed their mind. I'm not sure where Mashable is getting this story. So here again, that's actually good news. But if it's the case that they haven't changed their mind, Callburner will help. Now, I'm saying this because what Callburner does, Callburner really saved the day in this instance, because you get a recording of your side. I got a recording of Ben's side, and then I got a recording of both of them put together. Now, Ben was in Thailand, and we did not have the best connection. It was actually kind of funny. And so where this came in handy is because Ben is a podcaster, he recorded just his voice on his side. So I had my copy via Callburner of just me. I also had a backup copy that I recorded on my portable recorder, but Ben was like, he sounded like Bugs Bunny on Poison, right? He would just be go, right? And I was like, I can't use that. So the cool thing is, Ben recorded just himself on his side. Well, he's not going through Skype, so that recording was awesome. I had just me from, in this case, Callburner, and I also had it on my recorder. My recorder's version wasn't usable because every time Ben spoke, it was awful. And so what I was able to do is take my side from Callburner, as well as the recorded version from Callburner, and Ben's side. So what I did was I dragged the one that was just everybody, and then I lined up my side with that, and I lined up Ben's side with that, so that when I talked, it sounded a little echoey because it wasn't exact, but it was close enough to where the question and answers were going to line up. And then, so at that point, I had 3 tracks. I had Ben in track 1, I had the mixed version in track 2, and just my vocal in track 3. I was using the mixed version as kind of a guide. And once I got all the tracks lined up, I went in and muted the second one. That left me with just Ben and just me. So I really do like the way they split up their files, because, and it was really, now, if Ben wasn't a podcaster, if Ben was just somebody else, I would have probably had to say, yeah, we're going to have to do this some other time, because Skype was just, and it wasn't even a Skype issue. It was just where he was at in Thailand. He wasn't getting very good Wi-Fi connectivity. So Callburner is for the PC. And from what I understand, Call Recorder on the Mac is still going to work fine. But if you want to see me actually show you Callburner, go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/Callburner. And I've actually got a video that'll show you that particular software and how easy it is to integrate it with Skype. So with that, that's a little behind the scenes of what was going on. And when I always say that it takes 4 minutes to do 1 minute of podcasting, this interview was a labor of love to get it in a listenable format that you could understand, because Ben's got great stuff. And it's, well, you'll hear. Let me shut up and get to Ben. Here we go. Ben Kruger from AuthorityEngine.com. All right. Well, joining me all the way from Thailand. How cool is that? I'm familiar with this podcast. It's called Authority Engine. You can find it at AuthorityEngine.com. It's Ben Kruger. Ben, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, David. Real happy to be here and pumped to talk a little podcasting shop.
Yeah, and you are kind of a business podcast expert. It seems like you're helping a lot of businesses launch podcasts. And I guess we should start off first things first. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about Authority Engine? Tell us about a little bit about you and we'll just start from there.
Absolutely. So I think that was a pretty accurate introduction. I really appreciate that. And Authority Engine, I started I saw an opportunity in podcasting in kind of the managed podcast services front. There's a lot of people who are doing podcasting and who are doing it as part of their business and their marketing efforts. However, because they're entrepreneurs, they're business owners, they've got a lot of stuff on their plate, they don't have time to necessarily manage the back end. So do all the post-production and all that fun stuff, as I'm sure you're well aware. So how Authority Engine started out was to essentially provide that back end of services for podcasters. Essentially everything after you do the recordings, we take care of, as far as putting the episode together, posting it up on the site, writing up show notes, all that fun stuff to really make podcasting as easy as possible for the host. And from there, it started to grow because I noticed all of my clients were all business owners, and the entire reason they had podcasts was kind of twofold. One, they wanted to grow a really tight-knit community and really close relationships with their listeners, as podcasting does. But they also wanted to generate sales and drive traffic to their website and use it as a marketing tool for their business. So that's when I started getting into kind of specializing with business podcasts, or with people who have an online business, a blog, a community, or even brick and mortar sometimes, and help them specialize their podcast to really kind of double down on that whole marketing aspect and gaining clients, gaining traffic, and paying customers, as well as lifelong, I like to call them brand ambassadors.
Cool. Now, how long have you been doing that?
So I've been doing this for, it's 9 months now. So relatively fresh in the industry. And I come into it with a heavy background in marketing, or at least that's always been my passion. So when I saw podcasting as that medium, the opportunity as a marketing tool just screamed at me.
Absolutely. Well, for the skeptic, because I hear some people are like, well, how would a podcast help my business? Like, I'm trying to sell my day job on a podcast, and I'm not really sure I get it. So what would you say to someone like that?
So an example I like to use is, let's say you offer consulting services. Mm-hmm. This is a typical example because a lot of people are under the impression that, well, if I start a podcast, I need to get 20,000 downloads a month for it to do anything and for me to get anywhere. Whereas if you are offering consulting services, maybe this is even a total side project. It's not even your main thing. And when people get consulting services, how that works is, first, they have to understand that you know what you're talking about, that you're an expert in some area. And one of the best ways to portray that, you can write a book, you can start a blog, you can do all these things, but one of the best ways to portray that knowledge and kind of build up that knowledge base is through a podcast. So number one, you get to build that knowledge base and build that authority of being the expert in that space, but you also build a recurring audience that gets to hear your advice on an ongoing basis. They get to hear your voice personally in their earbuds when they're out walking the dog and doing that kind of stuff. So it really builds a lot of trust in you. So when they need some consulting services in that space, then, you're top of mind because you've already been their consultant. You've already been advising them via their earbuds every week, or, every 2 weeks or something like that for the past couple months. And any consulting client is going to be worth much more than if you have a blog where you sell a $10 ebook. So you don't need nearly as many listeners to a podcast for something that has a higher ticket item price, like consulting or higher end services, versus if you sell $5 ebooks, you're going to need a heck of a lot more listeners to see that same revenue on the back end.
Yeah, that's the thing I love is I'm now getting phone calls from people that are saying, okay, I've already got the 2100 microphone. I know I don't need a mixer. I've done this, I've done that, but I'm stuck here. So I'm getting a better educated client that's already halfway there. They're just looking for a little push over the hump, and they're good to go, which is really, really cool.
They've stepped up to the edge of the diving board and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
They just need to lean forward. Yeah.
Well, what do you see like when the average business person shows up? What do you see that they think their podcast should be?
So typically I get people that come and say, I'm not looking to make money right away. I'm not looking for this to, triple my business overnight. What I want to do is build a long-term, very loyal listener base and client base. So a large part of what I do is help them craft a show and strategically build a show around their brand and around kind of their central message as a business and as a company, and really attract those target listeners that they're going to want to convert into clients about a year down the road. So I take a little bit of a longer term approach, and that's not to say that people won't see instant results, because a lot of my clients have seen some really incredible growth quite quickly. But I generally take the more holistic, long-term approach in that when people come to me, they want that real solid community that they can fall back on, that they can sell multiple products to, that they can build the back of their business on the back of. So if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that in some cases you've had some people that have had a quicker turnaround. How long do you think it should take before people can see results? I realize, different markets, different products, different things like that, but any kind of general numbers you think that would kind of come to mind?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you hit it on it, or you hit right on it. I mean, it is going to be tough. It depends on the situation. Particularly the biggest thing I've seen that makes the big difference is when you start, how many followers do you have from the very get-go? Because it's kind of like the old investing principle. If you've got money, you can make more money. If you don't have any money, it's going to take a while to make that first, couple tiers, and then you can really start leveling up quickly. So this is something, it's very similar with the audience size. If you've got nothing to start out with, it's going to take a little while to get some steam. Whereas if you've already got, let's say 3,000 people on your email list, or you've already got, if you're really cooking by now, you already got 10,000 people on an email list, then a podcast could get really quick turnaround for you. So for example, one of my clients is Andrew Udarian. His podcast is called E-Commerce Fuel, and it's a podcast all about e-commerce. They interview e-commerce experts and e-commerce store owners, and essentially just help everybody out in the online shop and e-commerce space. With him, he came to me with a decent sized email list, and with kind of the launch strategy that we've built over experience with some of these other clients, we were able to get him to number 4 in the business category in iTunes, and get him some pretty good exposure in new and noteworthy. And I was just kind of glancing over his stuff this morning, and he's now at, I think, podcast episode 17, and he's currently sitting at just under 60,000 downloads for his podcast. So, it doesn't have to take very long to get that kind of a return when you have a little bit of a base to start from.
What do you say to the business that goes, I'm not sure what I should podcast about?
That's a great question. Perfect question. I get this one all the time. And so I've developed a pretty simple answer to this, in that, keep in mind, I come to podcasting with a complete focus on marketing value, and that's not to cheapen the art of podcasting or the craft of podcasting, but that's to make sure that you see results from it, instead of kind of podcasting your passion just to be podcasting out to your mother and 3 of her knitting friends. So what I tell people when they come to me is, where do you want your business to be 1 year out, as far as who is your exact target client or customer or paying customer? So I have them look at kind of 3 questions: is where do they want to go with their business? And, where does it stand right now? And where do they want to go with their business in 1 year? Who is their most profitable customer? Who has the most repeat orders? Who has the biggest orders? And who generates the most revenue? As well as who is that target market that you want to serve 1 year from now? So it's very much a start with the listener focus, and then make sure that your podcast fits both your listeners' wants and needs as well as your own as the podcaster. Because when it comes down to it, you've got to be sold on the program as well. You can't be podcasting about something that you don't care about.
Yeah, that that tends to come through. Now, usually, if they're going to be your customers or your clients 1 year out, then
typically it's something that the business owner is pretty interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any kind of frequency that you recommend, or in terms of weekly, twice a week, once a month?
It depends on the intention of the show. My preference for people that are trying to build a regular audience is once a week, and very specifically to nail down an exact publishing time and date per week. So like Tuesday mornings, 6:00 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the reason for that, you may have discussed this a few times on the podcast as well, but the reason for that is so that people have that exact time to look forward to. If they're driving to work or walking the dog or whatever, they know that Tuesday mornings they've got the School of Podcasting coming out, or they know that whatever morning they can expect that show will be there. And so your recurring listenership and your opportunity to build that ongoing relationship will be much stronger.
And you're just seen as a reliable friend at that point. So not only are you bringing great content, but gosh, you seem pretty reliable, because every Tuesday there you are in my phone. So
absolutely. The other I'll also advocate the other extreme, where you have absolutely no schedule whatsoever and you only publish content. Some bloggers use this pretty regularly, and there's a podcast called Viper Chill that does this. I think they only have like 4 or 5 episodes out, but every episode they put out is absolute gold. It's kind of that whole, if you're familiar in the blogging space, it's kind of that whole pillar content concept of every piece of content they put out is just pure gold. It is so helpful and so on point for the listener base that it kind of creates that raving, like, can't wait till the next one comes out, and it builds a little bit of that anticipation. But I wouldn't say that it's very good for someone who doesn't have an audience already and who doesn't kind of have some serious experience in that industry, where you can come out with just, game-changing content.
Right. Well, do you see any people doing business podcasts that you feel, that's probably not a good idea?
All the time. The biggest mistake that I see on a regular basis is people not thinking from their listeners' point of view. I mean, that's kind of a classic business mistake of developing the product before you talk to the customer. Very much kind of the cart before the horse type of approach. And then the other challenge that I see a lot is when people begin their podcast, but they don't quite understand how to transition people from passive listeners to getting them more engaged with their brand and more engaged with their products or services or whatever, what have you. So the one of the things I focus or try to help my clients focus in on is developing that, for lack of a better term, sales funnel, and developing that higher touch engagement funnel where you always send your podcast listeners to one spot and not have 6 different calls to action at the end of every episode like I see so prevalently.
Yeah, I was just on a podcasters roundtable and we're talking about that. We called it the laundry list, because it was like, hey, you get to the end of the show, follow me on Twitter, rate us on iTunes, join our newsletter, give us a thumbs up on Stitcher, and while you're at it, blah, blah. And it's like at the end, people are like, I don't know what I'm just going to hit stop, I think, at this point. So
what I really try to focus on is getting people to understand what is your number one target action you want people to take. And then when they take that target action, how can you lead them through steps that will allow them to easily do those other things like follow you on Facebook and follow you on Twitter and engage with you by, there's obviously a lot of different methods, but one of them is answering questions you ask on air in your show notes or, whatever.
Because they just end up doing nothing, so that's a great point. You have to figure out, which kind of goes back to what you're talking about at the beginning. I think the big question is you have to figure out who you're making the podcast for, and then why are you podcasting, which will then steer, that'll help you determine your call to action, and the knowing who the audience is going to help you determine what to podcast about. So when you find something that answers both those, here's why I want to podcast. So I want to be, seen as an expert, or if I want to keep my brand in their face or something like that. And here's who I'm podcasting to, and here's their needs and wants and common questions and things like that. You kind of find where those two cross, and boom, there's your podcast.
The intersection of figuring out exactly who your target listener is and then giving them exactly what they want, and in doing so, pushing your brand and getting your brand, building customer base and client base for your brand. So it's kind of the trifecta of bringing those things together. And I like to compare the multiple calls to action. It's kind of like going into a Mexican restaurant. You sit down, you pull out the menu, and they've got 300 different options. And you can't possibly, they all have tortilla, rice, either
right,
beef, chicken, or pork, and some kind of a cheesy sauce. So just give me like 3 or 4 options and call it a day. And with podcasting, if you could do 1 or 2, that's a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Because I know I'm guilty of it. And it's one of those things you don't realize, but every time they add a new social media, you start adding that to the laundry list. And all of a sudden you get done and you're like, what'd you talk about today on the podcast? Well, we talked about how to contact me. And that was pretty much, well, that's all we have today. So we'll see you later. Now let me tell you how to contact me.
10 minutes of the show. Yeah. And to kind of focus in on that as well is, why should the listener further engage with you? What's in it for them?
Yeah.
So it's very much you put out your episodes on your Facebook, but does following you on your Facebook actually do them any good? Do they find any additional resources there? Do they, why would they sign up to your email list if it's just going to notify them every time you have a new podcast? So it really comes down to making sure that it's all about the
right,
listener experience, and thinking every step of the way, if I were my listener, what would make me want to engage further? What would make me want to sign up the email list? What would make me want to go over to the show notes and check them out and leave a comment?
Yeah, because wherever you send them, there better be some value for them. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a dead end. I know you mentioned the e-commerce podcast. Any other success stories or things where you're seeing people benefit from their podcast?
Here's another example with one of my clients. We didn't launch this podcast, but we do the back-end ongoing editing and management of it. It's called the Tropical MBA podcast. It's a business podcast about people who are doing, well, similar to me. Their focus is on building a business and doing it in a location-independent lifestyle manner, to where you have a little bit more choice of freedom with your time and your location. So with them, obviously that's a personal interest of mine, so it mixed well. And with them, originally they had 2 podcasts. They had the Lifestyle Business Podcast and the TMBA radio show, I think is what it was originally called. And it became really obvious. They had 2 email lists, 2 websites, 2 everything. They had their entire brand was split between these 2 different shows, and the listener base was relatively similar. There was a little bit of difference, but there was some serious overlap there as well. And on the back end of that, their main product or service is a membership site where these entrepreneurs and location independent lifestyle design, whatever you want to call them, business people can share ideas. And essentially it's a paid forum and a really active community. And because they had their front end brand split, they had a really terrible time bringing people from both of those back to their central product. So what I helped them do was merge their shows into one and turn their entire branding over into one podcast, one website, and one back-end service, to where now it's kind of a streamlined funnel, if you will, to where they can really build that relationship with one solid group of people. And that can be a really powerful growth tool for their community. So I can say when I came into the community a year ago, they had something like 300 members, and I just checked the other day and they're a little bit over 700 now. So
Wow.
Definitely a high growth business opportunity right there.
Very cool. And it is one of the greatest kind of side effects, I guess, of the podcast, is it does build that community. Definitely.
Well, and if you listen to their podcast, very rarely will they say anything about their paid community. It's called the Dynamite Circle. Very rarely will they even say anything about that, other than that, occasionally there's live events, or they'll say, they'll talk about a specific thread that came up as part of the conversation. But you won't hear them say, go back to my website and sign up for the membership site. Instead, you'll hear them say, if you want, they've got a little bit of a email opt-in bait. I forget what it is. It's like the first 50 episodes of the podcast in a package and something else. But if you want more information on that, head back to our homepage at tropicalmba.com and you can grab that there. And then as part of the autoresponder sequence, they're over time exposed to the Dynamite Circle. And so the big goal there is to get them in the door, and then you can walk them through the steps that you want them to take.
Very cool. It's that whole thing and I that's kind of sounds like what you specialize in, is sitting back and saying, okay, I know the tool I want to use. Here's the podcast. Here's where I want to have them end up. And it's just a matter of creating that path from, okay, we're going to use the podcast to get them into the newsletter maybe, and the newsletter is going to promote this, which will then bring them to this, and along the way somewhere in there, somebody's going to give you some money, hopefully, and on it goes. Very cool.
Yeah. And when it comes to that, it kind of sounds like you're herding cattle at that point, but that's one of the reasons why I focus so much on, from the listener's standpoint, what makes them want to take the next step. So what can I offer them value-wise that will make them excited to take that next step with you, and not try to, force feed them through your funnel?
Well, speaking of giving people money, let's talk about giving you some money, because I know when you said the magic word and blah, 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 and we do those show notes and stuff like that, I bet half the audience will, wait a minute, does this guy do my show notes? Tell us about your services over there at Authority Engine, and any goodies that you have that are giving people, any carrots you're dangling out there in the marketing world.
Good lead in. All right. So over at authorityengine.com, you'll find our podcasts and all of our goodies. And what I'll say is three things. Firstly, our email opt-in bait, if you will, is a little mini PDF guide called Planning the Perfect Podcast. And it walks you through the basic steps that we use with all of our clients to understand, from a strategic standpoint, exactly who your podcast listener base should be to get the most out of it from a business standpoint, how you can find them and how you can target them, and then gives you kind of the strategic base to build your podcast around. So that's kind of where I like people to start, and that's my one ticket item there at the beginning. But as far as our services for Authority Engine, we have two different services. One is our back-end podcast editing and management service, which is what you were just talking about, where if you're an established podcaster, you already have one up and running, and you don't want to be dealing with all the back end anymore. You don't want to be dealing with all the editing and show notes writing. What we do is we set up a shared Dropbox folder, and after every episode that you record, you simply upload that recording file to Dropbox. From that, we'll add your intros and outros. We'll take out the ums and the ahs and all the boring or, tangential rants or whatever. We talk with you about what you want in your episodes content wise, and then we edit those episodes for content and streamline them to sound nice and make you sound smart. And from there, we take that, we upload it to your hosting service. We publish it on your website along with well-written and engaging show notes. Links out to all of the things that you talked about, all the people, the tools, the resources that you discussed, as obviously that's a really powerful way to market the podcast as well as provide the listeners with exactly what they're looking for. And we wrap that all up in a nice package and have it set to publish at your destined publish date. So depending on your publishing frequency, if it's, a weekly podcast or a monthly podcast or whatever, then we have kind of various packages to fit. But so the other service that we offer at Authority Engine is a podcast launch program, where it's essentially done for you podcast strategy, build and launch for your business, your blog, your brand, whatever. And it's a 4-week program to where initially we have a strategy call. We talk about all the different pieces, parts. Then we go away, we create your intros and outros, write up the scripts, get the professional voiceover work, do the art, all that stuff. We also help you and personally coach you through recording the first couple episodes to get you rolling. We've got a lot of materials that help you get the best sound quality and all that stuff. Then we do all the technical setup on your website. We get you set up with all the RSS feeds, get you submitted to iTunes, get you all that stuff. And then we create a launch strategy for your specific podcast based off of your goals. And in week 4, we push it out to the world. We execute your launch strategy. And then at the end of that week, we have a wrap up to where we look at the stats, we look at the feedback from the listener base and see how it was received by the listeners and how we can improve it and tweak it going forward.
Well, Ben, I want to thank you, man. What time is it there in Thailand?
It is 11 a.m., so right in my wheelhouse.
All right. Well, this works out good. It's almost 11 here in Ohio, so nobody's doing any crazy, it's 4 a.m. and it's kind of thing.
Yeah, so. That was our last Podcasters Roundtable. That was a little bit of one of those. I think it was 6 a.m. for me during that one.
Yeah. That's not fun. So awesome, man. Well, everybody check him out over at authorityengine.com, and I definitely recommend the podcast. It's good stuff. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a bunch, David. Really appreciate it. And man, anytime I can ever help you guys out, I'm always open.
So there you go. Super nice guy. And I'm actually going to be on his show in the future because it was kind of fun. At first, I had contacted him and said, hey, I would love to have you come on the show. And he had emailed me back, and basically we both said, hey, you want to come on my show? I'll go on your show if you go. And so, I'm going to be on his show in the future, kind of giving a perspective of where podcasting has come from and where I think it's going, which is up, 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 up. So check that out. Again, you can check out Ben at authorityengine.com. All right, now on to my favorite part of the show, and that is where I answer your questions. We've got a interesting question from Dustin Downhauer. Dustin, take it away.
Hi, Dave Jackson. This is Dustin Downhauer from DefiningMomentsTV.com. Before I ask my question, I just want to say thank you for your show. I appreciate all the information that you give out for free. It helps me. My wife and I were learning the aspects of podcasting, and we're trying to launch a show in the next month or so. And recently you were doing a show and at the end of it, you had a Matthew West song playing, and I wondered, how did you get the copyrights to play that? Because there's different songs that we've wanted to use, maybe for short snippets to play, and we just wondered how we could get the rights to do that. All right, thank you for your time. God bless.
Dustin, that is a phenomenal question, and here's the answer. You ready for it? I didn't. No, actually, for the record, I tried. I reached out to Matthew West's record label. I reached out to Matthew West. I reached out to anybody I could contact on their website to say, hey, I want to play this song or a snippet of the song, and here's what I got back. You ready? Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of absolutely nothing. And that is one of the problems with the record industry, for lack of a better phrase, is just still, they don't know what to do with podcasting. Now, to make a long story short, we've talked about this before because I did it again earlier in the year. Now, what I did, and this is what I thought was interesting, at the very end of the show, I actually went and commented on the guitar tone, and I like the use of the vocals, because if you want to get on the slippery, very, very slippery slope of fair use, there's a thing that if you comment on it in a critical manner, it's somehow fair use. So I was critical and commented on it that way. I would not want to bank on that one exactly, but I did do some research on this because a lot of people do, and I can now see kind of why a lot of people maybe avoid a little bit of that because it's not cheap. Now, if I was doing a music show, I would probably do this. Now, one of the guys I'm voting for in the podcast award is Brian Ibbott. He has been doing it legally since 2005, if not 2004. He might be a 2004 guy. And I did a lot of research on Brian, and in episode 9 of Brian's, he talked about how he contacted ASCAP. So I went over to ASCAP. In fact, I've got a kind of a request into ASCAP to have somebody come on the show and talk to us about this, because even the particular license that Brian was doing doesn't exist. And it seems like the closest thing that they have to podcasting is called the Websites and Mobile App License. And to make a long story short, you're going to be putting out about $300 a year. Now, it depends on how many downloads you have. It depends on how much revenue you are generating from the podcast. Did you hear that noise? That was the sound of a lot of podcasters laughing in their car. I think the one guy spit out his coffee. And anyway, so yeah, revenue generating from your podcast. And I've got links. Again, if you go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/381, you can go right over and read about websites and mobile app licensing, and you can actually see the contract. I'm hoping to get somebody on the phone, because the problem is even ASCAP, there's BMI, there's a clause in there about something about only in the U.S. Well, podcasting is global. And if ASCAP had half a brain, or BMI, or the music industry, they would come up with a license for podcasters, and they would make it affordable, because a lot of people don't have 10,000 downloads. They don't have 1,000 downloads, right? It's especially the more niche, whatever you want to do, your topic. So it's not just blues, it's electric blues. It's not just electric blues, it's electric blues from Austin. Right, the smaller you get, the more focused your group is, but the smaller the audience then. Don't know why they're not doing that. Well, because they're the music industry. They're just lost on all that stuff. But from what I saw, it was about $280 per license. So that would be per podcast. And then it was something like 0.0006 cents per download. And then basically, I think it was 15% of your revenue. A couple different things. So obviously, the more money you make, the more they want. So it's interesting. But in the end, from what I saw, from what I researched, and just basically researching Brian Ibbott, he's the guy I know that does it, you're going to put out about $300 a year. From what I saw on their website, you can't license just one song. Again, hello. That would be nice if you could. So, yeah. So here's the problem, and here's what happened last week. Last week, I was if you listen to that episode, it was very much a cerebral kind of podcast about the fact that I think you have something to say, and the fact I believe that podcasting can change the world one download at a time. And that song just reverberated with me like this is like the theme song to this episode. And so I made that decision with my heart and not my brain. And there are people, there's a name for people that make decisions with their hearts and not their brain. They're called spouses. Ba-dum-bum. Okay. So, So I need to quit doing that because I'm getting better at doing the wrong thing when I do that. So do as I say, not as I do. And I'm actually going to, like I said, I have a request in to get somebody on, because if I could do that, it would be awesome if I had if it was $300 a year for whatever podcast, but I know that's not going to work because then they're going to want to know what the downloads are on any show. But I would love to play music, not so much on this show, but I would do a music show. In fact, if you go over to Coverville.com, I'm going to take a tangent right here. Coverville is what radio used to be, from what I understand. Brian Ibbett is a guy who loves music. He has a gazillion CDs in his basement, and he plays nothing but cover versions of songs. And the beautiful thing of it is he is an absolute music geek. He knows everything about every band ever written, and he shares that information. So he gives you like a little story about each song. And by that, I mean brief. And it's his person. So you listen for the music, but you also listen because Brian gives you something you can't get any place else. And so it's his personality, and it's the music, and the fact that I can't get that anyplace else. He did a show on Van Halen. I grew up in the 80s, and Van Halen was my band, and he had all these weird covers that people were doing of Van Halen music, and it was interesting. Some of it I wasn't a fan of, but so I will do my best to get an official answer on this, but it looks like you got to spend about $300 to do this. And even that, it sounds like there's going to be kind of like, well, this is the closest we got. So it's kind of like wearing a suit that doesn't really fit you. It'll kind of work for now. And if nothing else, it shows that you're trying to be legal. I know Michael Hyatt, who does This Is Your Life, and also the author of Platform, a great book. Again, if you haven't seen that, he plays some Switchfoot at the beginning of his show, and the guy from 48 Days, Dan Miller, plays Taking Care of Business. So it may be that those guys just paid $300 for the year, and you do have to turn in quarterly reports to say what songs you did. So it is, it's a little work, but on the other hand, if you want to be legal, and in theory, if you think about it, you could actually play that music. And you ready for tangent number 2? Okay, you ready? Got your hands, I'm telling you, strap in. Speaking of music podcasts, you can make money a little bit with a music podcast through an Amazon link, through iTunes, has an affiliate program, and so does cdbaby.com. All those are the 3 major places that people buy music. I would fathom to guess that if you cover Amazon, iTunes, and CD Baby, you've got about 97%, and I'm just making that up, but I bet that's accurate, of where music is purchased. Because I don't know that many people are using Google Play. But all of those have affiliate programs. So if somebody came out to your show and you had a link to that music and they bought it, you would make like 7 cents a song. Wow. Where will you spend it all? But you can do that. Now, for more information about how to make money with your podcast, go over to morepodcastmoney.com and you can buy my book. I do want to give you a heads up. On Saturday mornings, myself and Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv are doing a show called Ask the Podcast Coach. It's something I started, and we brought Jim on because, well, he's Jim. How can you not bring Jim on? He's a cool guy. And we switched the time to 10:30. It's now 10:30 to 11:30. But I got to tell you, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/live, because I've been using Spreaker, which got me onto iHeartRadio. But I have a hard time getting a right volume level on that. And this week, it just wasn't working, period. I could not start a broadcast on Spreaker. And so we switched to Mixlr. It's mixlr.com. And that is free if you want to check that out. And it seemed to work. I like their chat a little better at Mixlr. But it's a horrible thing to do. If you think about it, there are a lot of TV shows, I should say, that were killed because the audience couldn't find them. come watch, whatever, Binky and the Wiz, Tuesday nights at 9 on NBC. And then it's come see Binky and the Wiz, Thursday nights at 6. Every Wednesday is Wacky Wednesday with Binky and the Wiz. And you're like, wait, where'd they go? And so it used to be, find me, and that's why I keep telling people, just go to schoolofpodcasting.com/live, and that will take you to whatever platform we're using. I know the one week I went back and tested Blog Talk Radio. And then I've been using Spreaker because now that I'm on iHeartRadio, I have to go through Spreaker. It's just not, don't know what's going on. And what was really weird about that is I was using, because again, you know me, I'm always playing with toys. I was using the Griffin iMic as my input. It's a USB interface. And I was able to broadcast live on schoolofpodcasting.fm, which is my streaming radio station. If you want to check that out, go over to schoolofpodcasting.fm.com, schoolofpodcasting.fm. So I go out live over that, which goes across a bunch of live streaming websites. And I was doing that, and I was able to use Mixlr. So I thought maybe for a second that only like one USB device can only power one broadcast, meaning Mixlr and not schoolofpodcasting.fm. But it worked fine. And then I went to Spreaker, and it was like, nope. And I went back later after I had disconnected all these other services, and it was just me and Spreaker, and it was like, no. In fact, I've had a hassle with it because it's a web-based mixer. All these other ones that I'm using for schoolofpodcasting.fm and for Mixlr, it's just like, hey, whatever you put into the mic input is what we're going to broadcast. There's no online mixer, which is what Spreaker is trying to do, but it just flat out did not work last week. So for the record, on Saturday mornings, if you want to hear us live, if you have any questions, if you're looking for just free podcast consulting, there you go. All you got to do is get up on Saturday morning, 10:30 to 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. We'll give you the call-in number, and we would love to have you there. So check that out, schoolofpodcasting.com/live, and whatever platform you're using, you'll find us there. And I apologize to Ryan K. Parker and anybody else that was looking for us on Spreaker last week that we weren't there, because that's just rude. Follow me on Twitter as well. I'm at Learn to Podcast, and we did announce it on Twitter that, hey, we're over here, but don't do that. And that goes back to just good practice of podcasting, is you always want to pick a schedule and be consistent. Well, we've done that. Saturdays at 10:30. We just can't, we keep moving the location. And so that's why if you go to schoolpodcasting.com/live. The other thing I've been asked, people have said, hey, Dave, when are you doing the next whole podcasting in 6 weeks class? That is going to be coming in January. I haven't set a date yet. And that is because I'm getting a lot of great feedback from my students. And I'm going to kind of come out with start a podcast in 6 weeks, version 1.1, I think, in January. And I've had a lot of just phenomenal feedback of people saying, hey, Dave, this was great, and I wish it had this. So these little itty-bitty things that I'm going to be adding. And the cool thing is, just if you're wondering, well, that's not fair to the people that take the class later. No, anything I develop later goes to every class that took the course. So I'm actually working on a handout right now for the third version of this class, and I'm going to give that same handout to people that took it, the second class and the first class, just for the record. As soon as I know that date, I will figure it out. Plus, the other thing is New Media Expo is in January, and I think I might not have it in January, or it'll start at the late January, something like that. But I appreciate everybody that's interested in that. And, that doesn't mean you can't learn how to podcast. I've still got the membership site with the step-by-step tutorials. And, of course, a little old me to help you along the way via email. And in some cases, we'll actually get on a chat if you've got a really integrated question that needs a lot of attention. A lot of times it's easier just to get on Skype or a Google Hangout or whatever it is and just have a quick, 10-minute chat would be easier than me trying to type the answers. So that is going to do it for this episode of the School of Podcasting's Morning Announcements. 381 is in the can. I got one call to action. We've got 5 days as I listen to this, and that is when the Podcast Awards is over. So the last day to vote is November 15th. And again, I want to thank everybody who has been voting for me. It's heartwarming. It really is. And I deeply appreciate it. If you could vote as many times as you can. You can only vote once a day. So if you could vote every single day from now to the 15th, again, if you like me, I appreciate it. If you hate me, shut me up. Go over and vote for the School of Podcasting in the general category, and I will be deeply appreciated. And that's it. I'm asking for one thing today. And there's no big plug about quick start plans and things like this. Please go vote at the Podcast Awards and podcastawards.com. Vote for the School of Podcasting in the general category. And I do thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next week. I'm here every Monday. And like I said, on every Saturday, live, if you want to talk to me live. And if you want to contact me, just go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact right after you vote for me at the Podcast Awards for the School of Podcasting. Thanks so much for listening. And until next week, class is dismissed. Go live a life worth podcasting about, and take care. God bless.